Hello, it's Patty with another Throwback Thursday for Crafting Kimmy Stamps. It is October 9th, and we will be using a stamp set called Seasons Tweetings. You'll see it here in a moment. We'll be using that bird in the right corner there to make a fall card. I don't know about you, but our falls are really crisp here, so I think that stamp works just perfectly for a fall card as well, even though it's a Christmas stamp set. I will also be pulling in Fancy Feathers for our background. Obviously, that goes so well with the bird theme that I'm going for. Both of those are on in the special section of Crafting Kimmy Stamp and are on sale for the month of October. I also have this product called Acryla Gouache in titanium white. And our ink refills, I have Salty Sea, Tempting Tangerine, Sandy Shores. I also pulled out Aqua Adventure, but I didn't end up using it. We will need some ink, so I have Marvelous Mocha for my stamping. I wanted a little bit of a darker ink just so I could see my lines better on the pattern paper. And overall, we're going to stamp right onto pattern paper and use our gouache to make an opaque painting on top of it so that you don't see the pattern underneath. It's different than watercolors, so I'll go over that in a few moments with you. Here is the pattern paper I'm going to be using today. It's Minte paper, Autumn Splendor. This pattern paper is a little thicker than the normal patterns paper that are in our stashes. I like it because it's thicker. It's going to hold up to the little bit of water I'm going to be using a little bit better than another pattern paper might. And I really liked that leaf pattern, so I wanted to stamp over top of that. I am just going to go quickly over what Acryla Gouache is. So this one is a white gouache. So gouache is kind of like a combination between acrylic paint and watercolor. It's an acrylic medium. In this case, this one's more acrylic than it is watercolor that you use, that you can water down to make it a little thinner. The consistencies can be very thick to really thin. And I thought it'd be cool to see if we could use our re-inkers with it to just add ink on top. And the good news is I learned that I could. So I already prepped my little palette there with some of our re-inker and paint. So I just put white gouache in each well there. And then I added re-inker on top and a bit of water with that pipette. I also you need some brushes that you don't really care about. So I wouldn't use any fancy, like soft brushes. A little bit harder brush is better. And I am just gathering, I'm going to stamp my stamp in that Marvelous Mocha, which I had already mentioned. So I am just pulling in my Misty. So in my Misty right now, I have it's basically a silhouette matte, knockoff matte that's sticky. So if you have a sticky grid, you can use that. I just chose what I had on hand. So I'm just pulling that out. I want to keep my stamp exactly, I want to keep my panel exactly where my stamp is. I don't want to have to try and line anything up again. So I'm going to keep it in the Misty the whole time. So I'm just going to plop in my pattern paper with the leaves right in the middle there. And it'll hold my paper down. I'm just trying to decide which direction I want my pattern paper to go in. And I liked that the leaves were kind of coming down. It's like, or do I want them going up? So I decided I wanted the leaves going down, the branches going up. We're going to take Marvelous Mocha ink, and I am going to just stamp over top with the little birdie here. And I'm sorry, I am off screen a little bit for the actual stamping part, but it's just a stamping block, so it should be, or stamping. We're all used to stamping anyway. So I'm just going to pull in my Marvelous Mocha ink. I chose a dark ink just so that I can see the lines really well. When you paint with Acryla Gouache or any gouache, it is opaque, which means that you can't see through it that well. In this case, almost 100% you can't see through it. So having darker lines is probably better just to see it through the pattern paper, and you'll end up covering your lines. So the reason I'm keeping my image in the Misty is that I can restamp over top of it once it dries. So I'm just restamping twice, just make sure it's a nice dark image, make sure I'm not missing any places, and I'm pretty happy with that overall. So as you can see, obviously any other mediums that you can use, maybe colored pencils you might have that are opaque would be okay too. But watercolors won't necessarily go over it unless you make it a very strong pigmented watercolor. And our markers will, but you have to only use really dark pigments for that. So I'm just adding, like I said, a little bit of white into that well there just to show you how I made my white pigment. And I added a tiny little just splash of water, just like a few drops. And you want it to be almost like skim milk consistency so that it's thin enough that it paints nicely, but it's thick enough that it'll cover over where you want. And I started with white just to show you what it looks like when you paint it down. Right now I decided that I want that pom-pom white and a part of the hat and some berries. So the white really obviously shows you how opaque this is. You're not going to see any of the leaves through it. I would recommend that if you are trying this, is try not to overpaint over top of the layers you put down first, especially if you have a different type of gouache. This one, once it dries, you can add layers on top because the layer below you won't end up scrubbing it away. Other types of gouaches out on the market are more like a watercolor, opaque watercolor. If you use that and you try and add another layer over top, you may end up scrubbing the layer underneath and ruining it. But this, like I said, is more like almost like acrylic paint. So once the layer's dry, you can add more layers on top. One thing you do want to do is, again, dry in between layers if you're going to add a second layer on things. I'm also going to add this to the wing feathers, just because I want some white undertones first. And again, it's just quite simple. You're just painting strokes in from each thing. I don't really worry if I'm going over the lines because we are just going to restamp over top of it. I might end up speeding through part of the process here and just slowing down so I can explain things as we go along. But this part's pretty simple. It's just painting where I want my white. And I'm just starting with that just so that I know exactly where I want my white highlights to be. And then I can go over it once it's dry with another layer. I'm just speeding along the video now just because this part is a little bit repetitive and also just to make the video a little shorter for us tonight. But as you can see, I am just going through the wings of the feathers right now. Those I'll just paint with white so that it has a nice highlight underneath. And then I'll come in with blue on top of it after once it's dried. I also went into the chest area and the little berries at the bottom. And then I can move on to my next color, which will be the orange. So I'll go over that in a few moments. And meanwhile, you can just watch me paint the last little berries there, and then we'll move on to the orange. So now I'm moving on to my orange. I picked out Tempting Tangerine and Creamy Caramel, and I had already mixed it up in my palette there, but I just wanted a bit more of a darker orange than Tempting Tangerine was. Obviously added the white gouache in there as well, and some water, and thinned it down to, like I said, that skim milk consistency. I am going to paint the little toque, my hat there, and I will paint the leaves as well. So I don't need a lot of this, so I actually probably mixed up way too much paint, but that's okay. You can learn for next time. And I will paint all three leaves the same color, and then I come back and decided that obviously some of it was being a little too, it was a little too consistently the same color. So what I do is I'm going to just add a tiny bit more white into my orange. So I'm just pulling my orange on top of the palette there, adding a little bit of white just to make it a little bit of a more creamy orange color. And you'll see the leaves are so small, they dry pretty fast. I was able just to kind of paint over top of the one on the back there, just because it was such a small amount. And it probably was dry by the time I did that. And now I'm going to go on to my blue. So mixed in Salty Sea with the gouache and a bit of water. And I am just going to paint over the whole face here. And I'm not worried about going over top of the eyes. Like I said, I'm going to stamp over it. I did try and leave the mouth uncovered as best I could, just so I know where it is. I could paint over the whole thing, let it dry, and then come back in with my orange too, which probably would have been fine in looking back now, but that's okay. I just left it. I'm just doing the top of the wings there, and we'll do the body as well, and down the tail feathers. Again, just speeding that up just so that you guys can just see quickly what I'm doing, but it's just painting flat colors, like I said. Didn't go into too much extra details. You definitely can. If you wanted to, you could totally make different values of the ink combo with the white gouache, and you could always go in and do a second layer once the first layer is dry. Oops, my hand got caught on the sticky grid there for a second. Luckily, I have it on the sticky grid, or that would have been a disaster. Just because I wouldn't have been able to restamp over top of it perfectly. But because I was lined up in the corner of the Misty, we're all good. So just did the feathers, and then I am going to go up to the wing feathers now. And oh, nope, I decided to change over to the brown. So I definitely made way too much of the brown. Brown is a mix of between the white gouache and Sandy Shores. And I just decided to dilute it a little bit. That Sandy Shores has a lot of pigment in our re-inker. So it does, a little bit goes a long way with it for sure. So just going to paint the little stick that the bird's on. And I believe that's all I needed to paint with the brown. So like I said, I mixed up too much. Here's where I was deciding on painting the beak. The face was dry at that point, so I was able to go back up and paint the beak in. Maybe could have waited a little bit longer, but I was being a little bit impatient. And now I'm just going to go quickly over everything else. So the pom-pom, I just added a bit more white over top. Just tried to add a little bit of texture in by dabbing it in. Same with the hat, and I'm just going over those layers one more time. Just make sure they're super opaque for myself. Did the berries and of course the wings, and trying to decide if I wanted to do those, repaint over those, or if I was going to leave them. So this is going to add blue. I'm just going to add a bit more of the orange in. And like I said, by doing layer by layer, everything is pretty dry by this point, by doing it just quickly. But I will leave this overnight, and actually I left it for a couple days so that everything dried really well. It's the next day, and unfortunately I lost some footage there of me painting the beak and the wings, but I just painted in the wings with blue and then added the white highlight back in and painted orange into the beak. Now I'm just taking Marvelous Mocha, and I am just going to ink right over top of my painting now that it's dried for 24 hours. And that way it'll just add my lines back in, and you won't even know that I had painted underneath it. I am just going to add some pigment pen right over top of the eyes because they didn't stamp as well as the other areas. I could have just re-inked the stamp again, but I just decided for easy, I'd just draw it in with a pen. I am going to just add a white highlight to the irises and the beak as well with a gel pen. I will say that you should, if you are doing this, you should clean your gouache while it's still wet. It is going to be a little bit of a chore to clean up, but I was surprised that the ones with our hybrid ink aren't actually dry, so that's cool to know. I'm just about done with the stamping part. I'm just going to share a little tip if you're using a little sticky grid here. It's better to curve the mat and pull the image off than to try and peel the image right off of the mat flat, or you may have your pattern paper warp a little bit. And then I'm just going to put the little piece of plastic on top and store it in my Misty for next time. I am now pulling in the stencil for the Fancy Feathers Stencil, and I am just going right over top of a pattern paper that has like a white scarf pattern on it. And I thought that would be fun to add our little feathers on to our background. I decided I only wanted the feathers that kind of look the same as our image. I chose not to use the ones that are more rounded, peacock looking feathers, because I just wanted to choose a few feathers here. So I started with Salty Sea, and I'm just adding with a soft brush just some Salty Sea to each of those feathers. And the nice thing about choosing a white background like this is our ink will obviously go through. and we can still have a little bit of texture in the background as well. I then decided to use designer denim, which is also on sale this month, just to add a bit more of a dark center to each of the feathers. So you'll just see me pull that in, and just chose to use a little bit, just sparingly, because I wanted to try and keep it mostly the salty sea to match my bird. And just did a quick inking. I love the fact that we can combine our inks to make a lighter and a darker shades. I will go back in after I'm done with my designer denim with the salty sea again and just add that over top as well, just to blend it out a bit. And I was happy that the pattern was feathers, but that it wasn't too many of them. Sorry, that's just my cat playing with a box right now. Apologize. I think she's found something to play with. Anyway, this part is sped up too, just because I wanted to do it quickly. As you see, I'll pull the stencil away, and we just have just a few feathers in the background. When you're inking on top of this feather stencil, just be a little bit careful about some of the edges. I prefer a brush over some of the other blending tools I use, just because of the edges. I was going to pull in that blue pattern paper because I really like the wood grain on it, but then I just decided not to. And I am going to pull in this orange plaid because I wanted a bit more orange for my background. So I'm just going to cut a little strip. I made this card pretty simple today. I didn't want to get too many layers because the painting did take a little bit of time. But I'm going to put that in the middle, and then I'm going to put this on top. As I was looking at it, I decided what card base I wanted to use, so I just went to go grab that. And I'm probably going to just do a little cut here so that I can, because it took me a little bit of time to decide what I wanted. I did find some cardstock. I chose some Stampin' Up. I think it's Coastal Cabana, which matched the Salty Sea pretty closely, so I thought that would be a good one to use for my card base. I just cut it into standard A2 card base top folding, and I am just bringing in my Stampin' Up trimmer. I use 2 trimmers on occasion. I just use the other orange one, and it's just the one I usually pick out, but I do like this one for scoring my card bases. And I'm just going to make sure that that fold is nice and crisp by using a bone folder. And then I'm going to place my layers together and see if I need to add anything. Right now, I felt like I have a lot of blue, and I was missing, the orange wasn't as cohesive. So I am going to add a little bit of an inking layer. And I chose Creamy Caramel for that. I didn't want to go with Tempting Tangerine because it's so bright orange. But the Creamy Caramel I thought matched well with the plaid paper. And I'm just going to take a little blending brush and just add it along the edge here. Now, because this pattern paper does have a bit of it's white, but there's a little bit of a brown tone too. I did find that the Creamy Caramel wasn't quite the color I was wanting to go for. It was a little bit more yellow than I remembered. That's when you should pull out your swatches just to double check things. But that's okay. I'm still going to use it, and I'm going to put it against my card base. And I didn't necessarily like that 100%, so that's okay. I'm going to add in another color. So I am trying to debate between Sandy Shores and Marvelous Mocha, and I decided on Marvelous Mocha. So I'm going to now pull in that. And I'm not going to go down as far as I did with my Creamy Caramel, but it's just going to darken up my edge, make it a little bit more of a brown color than that orangey yellow. And I'm a lot happier with that after that. So I'm just going around the edges quickly here. And I have a grid paper down underneath, so I didn't mind that I just got ink all over that as I was inking. I tended to replace it after each project anyway. And I just like the contrast better on that. Decided I would ink up my edges of my pattern papers as well with the Marvelous Mocha, just to give it a kind of a crisp edge. I see Danielle use this in her videos, and every time she does it, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. So this time I actually remembered, and I'll just make our edges a little darker. And I did it to everything but our scallop circle, just because trying to get into each crevice of the scallops is not the easiest. But I did do it on top of the pattern paper where my stamped image is as well, the circle. And I really liked how that looked. And just gave it a little bit of a more vintage tone to it too. And then I am just going to glue all my layers down. And I use Nouveau glue for that. So just going to go find my glue. And yep, there it is. So just glue everything down. I'm going to probably cut that out. But I just glue everything flat just because I feel like this card I might send to somebody. And I don't want too much bulky layers. But you could definitely pop this up as well. So I'm just going to end up just inking up everything, or sorry, gluing everything. And then we're going to decide on what we want for our sentiment. Now that I've done the outside of my card, I did decide that I wanted to keep the sentiment to the inside. So I'm just going to pull in my Misty again, and choosing our Seasons Tweetings stamp set, I am going to do some creative stamping. This is a Christmas stamp set, so obviously being a fall card, I don't want it to seem Christmassy. That's okay though, we can take two sentiments and combine them together. So I'm taking May Your Heart Sing This Christmas, and I'm going to add a Post-it note over top of Christmas so that I don't stamp that part. I take Marvelous Mocha ink, and I am just stamping everything but Christmas. I'll do it twice just to get a good impression. So I'm just going to pull that back out. And again, sorry, I'm a little bit off screen there for the stamping part, but you saw what I did the first time. Just adding Marvelous Mocha again, stamping again. And that way I don't have to worry about it saying Christmas at all inside my card. I'm then going to pull this stamp off, and I'll clean it after once I'm off camera here. And then I pull Seasons Tweetings out. I don't want it to say Seasons Tweetings, I just want to say Season. So I'm going to take a Post-it note again, and I'm going to cover over the apostrophe S in Seasons and the Tweetings. When I do this, it is a capital S, and maybe you don't want a capital S for your inside, just because it isn't necessarily supposed to be capitalized there. But I don't care. It's a whimsical card, and as long as it says what I want it to say, I don't care if it's or grammatically incorrect. I am just pulling designer denim and our stencil, and I'm just going to add a few random feathers in, just to add a little bit more fun on the inside of our card. I want to keep it quite subtle, so I just do in a soft layer of the feathers on the inside. That way I can still write over top of it if I want to write a message. But it kind of just has a smattering of feathers on the inside. Then I am pulling in our stamped image again, and I was going to put it maybe in the corner, but then decided now I'll just put it right underneath our sentiment. If you find that having the stamp on the inside leaves less room for you to write, you could always write on the top panel there, or you could write over top of the stamped image as well. Pretty happy with that. Now I just have to do one more thing to this card. I am now going to just pull out some gems from my stash. I have a lot, and I thought this kind of ambery color would be good. I'm just pulling out a little spoon so I can add some gems to my triangle tray. And this just helps contain the gems a little bit. I do end up spilling a few out accidentally, but it's okay. And I just thought the orange would add nicely to just add a little bit more orange to our background. So I'm just going to add a little daubs of glue, kind of where I strategically want them. You will see that as I go along, I tend to vary my sizes of my gems. And I do miss one spot, but don't worry. I actually do see it in the camera, and I do fix it after. So I'm just adding gems, just unfortunately kind of shake it out a little bit. And you can see I do get some gems outside of my triangle tray because they always seem to land the wrong way in my tray for whatever reason. Must be more heavy on the top, and so then they land in there like that. But I'm just varying my sizes of my gems, trying to kind of keep a triangle appearance a little bit. You'll see I'm going to add another gem to that top there since I didn't decide not to add a sentiment. I felt like it needed one more gem up there just to kind of space everything away. I took off the small gem in that one spot just because I felt like I needed more of a medium-sized one. And that's just me playing around. The nice thing about this glue is it does dry clear, so if I make a mistake, it will dry and you won't even notice. As you can see, I did miss that one on the right top there, but I will go and fix it once I see the camera. I am just pulling in my inks and my supplies just to show off what I've used. So just my ink pads, my stamp set. Thought I'd share the process of how I kind of take my photos for my projects too. Normally I'll have like a pattern paper underneath instead of this grid pattern that's messy, but I just wanted to show off what I've been using. I thought I'd put my little bone folder there because I do like to have the card propped up higher than the ink pads, but obviously that wasn't thick enough. So I'm just going to take a stamp block, put that underneath. There, I feel better about that. And I just had to add the stencil in. And it took me a moment to find the stencil. There it is. I'm going to add that to the top. And then I just arranged my inks to make them, visually appealing. Thought, oh, maybe I'll group them up, but I like them in a line, so you'll see me play with that a little bit. But there's all the products I used. I'm just going to pull in some gems and spill them down on the sides. And that's my card for tonight. I hope you enjoy. Sometimes we just have to break out of our mold, so I do like my card. And just playing with everything, just like sometimes like having my inks at a weird angle like that. I hope that you enjoyed this project, and that if you do try this, let me know. Just zoom in a little bit so you can see the details. I'm pretty happy with it overall. I think it's pretty cute. And if you're like me and it's weird not having a sentiment on the front of the card, you can always go look through your stash and see if you have something small that'll work too. Sometimes I'll do a generic like happy birthday or thank you on the front. So depends on where I want that card. That's where I just noticed that I didn't have a gem on the top there. So I just decided, well, I have a whole bunch out here. I might as well just grab one and make sure that I have a gem there. Boop, just like that. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great night.